They thought the storm had swallowed him forever, one of Boston's most powerful men, and the infant son no fortune could ever protect. But in the cold dawn on Gloucester's rocky shore, it was not wealth, nor bodyguards, nor privilege that saved them. It was a 7-year-old homeless girl with nothing but courage in her chest and sand clinging to her bare feet. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe and stay with us through every chapter until the very end. The Atlantic wind carried a bitter edge that morning, sharp with salt and grief. Gloucester's fishing docks were still, the nets hanging heavy, dripping from the night's rain. Among the scattered gull cries and the groan of moored boats, Lily Parker crouched near the breakwater, clutching her thin cardigan tight. She had not eaten since yesterday. Hunger gnawed at her, but she was used to it. What startled her now was something different, a sound that did not belong to seagulls or sea foam. A cry. Thin. Broken. Human. She froze, scanning the horizon. The first light of dawn streaked the gray water, and there, tangled among the kelp and driftwood, lay a man sprawled across the rocks. Beside him, a bundle moved weakly, letting out another fragile wail. Lily's heart slammed against her ribs. She stumbled forward, the stones slick beneath her bare feet. "Hello, sir?" Her voice shook, but the man did not respond. His suit jacket was torn, his face pale, streaked with seawater and blood. His right hand clutched something metallic, a gleam of silver. An elegant Swiss watch cracked down the glass. But it was not the watch that held her. It was the baby. The infant's cheeks were blue-tinged, his tiny fists trembling. Without thinking, Lily scooped him into her arms, pressing him against her thin chest. Her own warmth was pitiful, yet she tried, rocking him with instinct far older than her 7 years. The man stirred, coughing seawater, his eyes blinking open, piercing gray, confused, searching. "Henry." His voice was barely a rasp. "He's here," Lily whispered quickly. "I've got him. He's alive." Relief softened his features for a moment before pain wrenched through his body. He tried to rise but collapsed again, gasping. "Don't move," Lily pleaded. "The tide's coming in. I'll get help." But who would help? The sheriff's office frightened her. She had learned long ago that people in uniform asked questions she couldn't answer. The townsfolk barely noticed her existence. A ragged child scrounging bread crusts. If she brought them a half-dead man in a ruined suit and a baby, they might not listen. Still, she couldn't leave him. With effort far beyond her size, Lily dragged him inch by inch higher up the sand, away from the surging tide. The man groaned, his hand fumbling toward the baby as if anchoring himself to life through that small heartbeat. "My name's Lily," she said quickly, kneeling beside him. "What's yours?" His lips trembled. "Jonathan. Hale." The name meant nothing to her but the way he said it, like a man used to being heard, used to commanding, clashed with the broken state he was in. His other hand brushed the cracked watch, holding it as if it were treasure, or perhaps a key. The baby whimpered again. Lily pulled her cardigan tighter around him, rocking softly. "Shh, Henry. You're safe now." She said the name as though it were her own brother's. Jonathan's eyes flickered open again, astonishment in his gaze as he heard her. "How? How did you know?" "You said it," she answered simply. "Henry." Something like gratitude or despair crossed his face. "Please, don't let them find us." Them. The word chilled her more than the wind. She wanted to ask who, but his eyelids drooped, his body limp against the sand. Fear pressed at her throat. She could run. She could drop the baby and disappear into the alleys where she belonged. But something fierce rose in her chest, a defiance born from every night she had survived alone. She would not leave them. She remembered the old trawler shack near the North Jetty, abandoned since Mrs. Green's husband passed. The place reeked of fish oil, but it had walls, a roof, and blankets still folded in a chest. It was the only refuge she knew. Gritting her teeth, Lily hauled at Jonathan's arm, urging him onto his feet. He staggered, half-conscious, leaning heavily on her fragile frame. Step by step, she dragged him toward the shack, Henry swaddled tight against her heart. By the time they collapsed inside, dawn had broken fully, spilling pale light across the harbor. Lily tucked the baby into a wool blanket, then crouched beside Jonathan, who lay shivering on the planks. "Stay awake," she begged, shaking his shoulder. "Don't die. He needs you." His lips moved. "Accident. Not accident. Cole." The rest dissolved into incoherent murmurs. Lily pressed her ear close, straining, but the only sound was the hollow boom of waves against the rocks. She sat back, her small body trembling. Outside, Gloucester stirred awake, the creak of boats, the whistle of early fishermen. No one knew that inside this forgotten shack lay a man whose name carried power across Boston boardrooms. No one knew that the fate of a child, and perhaps more, rested in the arms of a girl no one had ever noticed. But Lily knew. And though she was just 7, she understood that the world had shifted forever on this cold morning. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, squared her thin shoulders, and whispered into the dim air, "I'll keep you safe. Both of you." The shack smelled of old rope and salt, a breath of past storms held in wood. Lily woke to the soft, hitching breaths of the baby, a sound like paper rustling in winter. She sat up, carefully adjusting the wool blanket she had wrapped around him, and checked the folded cardigan she'd tucked near Henry's chest to trap what heat she could borrow from the morning. Pale light slid through the gaps in the boards, laying thin silver lines across the floor. Behind her, the man stirred. "Henry," he rasped, lurching upright with a cry that tore through the quiet. His gray eyes were raw with panic. "Where? Henry?" "He's here," Lily whispered, quickly lifting the bundle into his line of sight. "He's warm." "He's okay." The terror in the man's face collapsed into relief so deep it looked like grief. He pressed a shaking hand to the baby's back and closed his eyes, a tremor shuddering through him from shoulder to jaw. Up close, Lily saw how bad he looked. Suit torn, shirt stiff with salt, a jag of dried blood at the temple, skin still chalked with cold. But it was the way he hovered over the child, as if breath itself depended on the rise and fall of that tiny chest, that made Lily hold hers without meaning to. "I'm Lily," she said softly, as if speaking to a wounded dog. "You told me your name before. Jonathan Hale." He nodded once, still locked on the baby. "Henry," he whispered again, like a prayer he had to keep repeating or God might forget. Then his gaze flicked around the room, scanning the seams of the door, the slats in the wall, the single small window with its film of salt. The look changed, fear sharpening into calculation. "Is anyone outside?" he asked. "No." Lily shook her head. "Fishermen are out on the water. People don't come here." He swallowed and faced her, seeing her fully for the first time, the thin arms, the gray dress at least 2 winters old, the fierce steadiness in eyes too old for 7. "You pulled me from the rocks," he said, as if it were a fact he needed to file in order. "And you kept him warm." "I tried," she answered. "You were heavy. I thought the tide might take you." His hand went to his wrist. The Swiss watch, its sapphire glass cracked into a starburst, hung loose. His thumb worried the crown, then stilled. Lily noticed how carefully he handled it, as if touching a fragile animal. "Does it still work?" she asked. He looked at the watch, then at her. It has to. The words were simple, but the gravity in them settled in the room like a third tide. Jonathan braced himself against the wall and drew a steadying breath. "There was an explosion," he said, "on my yacht just past 10-Pound Island. It wasn't a fuel leak. It was placed. Timed." Lily's fingers tightened around the blanket. "Someone tried to hurt you? And the baby?" He nodded. "To erase us. To erase what I know." He lifted the watch. "This isn't just a watch. There's a microsecure module in the movement, embedded behind the balance wheel. It stores encrypted keys to a drive that contains proof." He paused, collecting air. "Proof that Richard Cole engineered fraud, bribery, and sabotage to force a takeover of my company." The name meant nothing to Lily and everything to Jonathan. It was written across years, the conference rooms with their cold glass, the long tables, the click of pens. Richard Cole, a smile like a polished coin, a handshake that always felt 1 degree too firm. CFO, friend, then serpent. "My dad used to say a watch tells the truth about a man," Lily murmured, glancing at the cracked face. "Maybe yours tells more truth than the others." Jonathan almost smiled, the expression quickly swallowed by pain. "Cole is trying to flip the board in 48 hours, he said. "If he does, he'll bury our pediatric trial data and repurpose the funding. I have records, wire transfers, shell entities, a private conversation captured off a conference room mic. It's all locked behind this module and an external passphrase. If we can get it out, get it to the right hands, the truth will stand up on its own legs." He checked Henry again, his palms spanning the tiny back with infinite gentleness. "But I'm not moving fast for a while," he added, grimacing. "And we may already be followed." "Followed?" The word felt like a gust through the boards. "I saw a low-profile skiff shadowing us before the blast. And Cole has people. Investigators who don't ask questions about warrants." He looked at the door. "They'll search the shoreline. They'll start with the obvious shelters, and then the places nobody goes." Lily looked around the shack that had shielded her on rain nights and felt a sudden, fierce loyalty to the old boards. "This is nobody's place," she said. "They won't think of it." "They will," he said gently. "They'll think of everything. That's what money does when it's scared." Lily reached for the watch, then hesitated. "Can I see? Just to know what I have to protect." He slid it into her palm with surprising trust. It had a weight that felt larger than metal, as if all the grown-up things, deals and lies and signatures, had been pressed into its gears. The fractured crystal lammed a spiderweb of light. Jonathan tapped the crown twice and the cracked dial breathed to life, faint luminous numerals unveiling a second ring of markings she'd missed. "There's a hidden pusher here," he said, guiding her fingertip to a hairline seam between the lugs. "It arms the secure mode. Then you enter a 5-part pattern on the crown. Forward, back, back, forward, press, in rhythm with the seconds hand when it crosses 12. If you're off by even a quarter beat, the module wipes itself." Lily listened as if he were teaching her to tie a knot that would keep a boat from slipping away. "And the passphrase?" she asked. His gaze slid to Henry. "It's split. Half is here, in the module. The other half is in my head. Or," he faltered, "in case I didn't make it, it's with someone who will know what to do." He exhaled, bracing against a wave of dizziness. "A reporter in Boston. Julia Monroe. She's the only one who published when it wasn't safe to." Lily nodded slowly, feeling the edges of a map forming in the air between them. Gloucester's harbor, the rail bus to Boston, the roads she'd heard fishermen name over fried dough on Saturdays. The map ended at a big building she could picture only by the sound of adults saying its name. The Globe. A sound outside, boards creaking under a careful step, pulled the room tight. Jonathan's head snapped up. He eased the watch from Lily's hand, tucked it beneath his torn shirt, and drew Henry close, his breathing thin. Lily went very still, like a mouse when the cat's shadow touches the floor. The steps sounded again, closer, then paused. A mutter. Another set of footsteps joined the first, heavier, impatient. Whoever they were trying not to sound like men. The doorknob trembled. Lily's mind did what it always did in fear, made a list. Window, too small for him, big enough for her. Chest. Blankets inside, heavy lid, smells like fish. Good to hide the watch if they... Her hand moved before the thought finished. She took the watch, flashed Jonathan a look she hoped said, "Trust me," and slid it under the false bottom of the wool chest, a trick she knew because Mrs. Green had once hidden coins there from a mean nephew. The board clicked into place with the softest sound. Henry whimpered, then, as if the quiet were too heavy to bear. Lily bent over him, her voice a thread. "Shh, little lighthouse," she breathed. "Hold your beam." The doorknob stilled. Low voices traded a thought. A long moment stretched and thinned until it almost tore. Then the footsteps retreated, 6, 8, 10 paces, and dissolved into the wash of gulls and water. Lily waited until her lungs remembered how to be lungs. She leaned back against the chest and looked at Jonathan. He had not moved, but something in his face had, gratitude opening like a cut flower in winter. "You did that," he whispered. "We did that," she corrected. "But they'll come back." He nodded once. "We can't stay." Lily reached into the chest again. Not for the watch, but for a thick, oil-sour blanket she knew could hide a person's shape and, with luck, their story. She draped it over Jonathan's shoulders, and then, without asking permission the way children aren't supposed to, slid Henry into the sling she knotted from her cardigan and a strip of sacking. The baby's weight settled against her bony hip, as if he'd always belonged there. "You said Boston," she said. "Julia Monroe." "Yes." The word was a wince and a vow. "At the Globe." "Then we go to Boston," Lily decided, as if choosing a shorter line at a bakery. "I know a fisherman who owes Mrs. Green a favor. He runs a morning haul past the outer marker. We can ride low in the hold where the wind can't see us." Jonathan stared at her, astonishment softening into the first shape of trust. "You're 7, he said, as if reminding the universe. "I'm Lily," she answered, lifting her chin, "and Henry is cold." He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with resolve. "Then we go." He reached for the watch where she'd hidden it and paused. "May I teach you the pattern?" he asked. "In case I'm tired." She nodded, and he took her small hand in his shaking one. Together they counted seconds, listened for the tiniest tick, learned a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat steadying itself after almost stopping. Forward, back, back, forward, press. The fractured crystal winked. It accepted her. "Good," he said, and for the first time there was iron in his voice. "If something happens, you run. You find Julia. You say, 'Look in the crown.' She'll understand. And Lily, don't say Richard's name to anyone with a badge until you see her." "Because they might be his," Lily said quietly. "Because money makes strange deputies," he answered. Outside, the day brightened without warming. Lily listened one more time for the wrong kind of footsteps and heard only the honest sounds of a harbor working. She lifted the latch, eased the door, and slipped into the thin winter sun with Henry against her, Jonathan behind, and a watch that could force truth to stand beneath it. The gulls rose as if clearing a path. The tide turned. They moved toward the pier like three notes in a song that hadn't been written yet, one high and small, one broken and brave, and one that could grow into an anthem if given breath and time. Somewhere in Boston, a printing press slept with ink in its veins, waiting for the weight of words. Somewhere in a glass tower, a man named Richard Cole believed time was on his side. On Lily's wrist, the second hand swept past 12. Time, it turned out, was busy choosing. By mid-morning, a pewter light lay over Gloucester Harbor, the kind that made everything, water, hull, sky, choose the same tired gray. Lily, Jonathan, and Henry moved like shadows along the back of bait sheds and stacks of lobster pots, keeping fishermen's voices between themselves and the street. Every sound felt magnified. The tick of Jonathan's breath, the whisper of Lily's soles on wet planks, Henry's small sighs from the sling at Lily's chest. "Stay with the pilings," Lily murmured, glancing behind them. "The boards don't squeak as much where the tar's thick." Jonathan followed her map as if it were scripture. Pain wrote itself in the tightness of his jaw, but the look in his eyes, alert, calculating, protective, had cleared. "We need a roof," he said softly, scanning the harbor front. "Someplace off the main walk." "The old inn," Lily answered. "Mrs. Green's. She boarded it up after her husband died. People say it's haunted, but that mostly keeps kids out." "Mostly?" Jonathan asked, managing a rasp of a smile. "Mostly," Lily said, and the corner of her mouth twitched too. Harbor Loop bent them around a row of boats named for girls and saints. Farther up, the spire of a church shouldered the pale sky. Lily led them down an alley that smelled of diesel, cut through a garden of coils and buoys, and stopped near a narrow three-story building with salt-blind windows and a sign whose gold letters had tired to a dull whisper. Green's Wharf Inn. "Through the alley," Lily said. "There's a side door with a loose hinge." They slipped in. The hallway sighed with the particular silence of disuse. Lily moved past a phalanx of dining chairs stacked on tables and tugged open a door behind the front desk. The stairwell breathed a cold that smelled like the ocean trying to remember wood. She led them up one flight, then another, to a floor sheeted in dust that softened footsteps to suggestion. "In here," she whispered, pushing open the door of a corner room. An iron bed frame stood like a rib cage without the rest of the animal. Net curtains hung in transparent tatters. But the room's bones were good. Walls, a latch that worked, a narrow closet with a low, square mouth at the back. Jonathan eased against the wall and sat, the movement careful, controlled. Lily unknotted the sling and lifted Henry into his father's arms. The baby settled with a sigh, the kind that could undo a city's guard. For a moment, the world outside ceased its hunt, and the room held the small, ordinary miracle of a child falling asleep on the chest where his heartbeat began. "Thank you," Jonathan said. Lily shrugged, though her chest warmed. "You can lay low while I find Mrs. Green." "She'll know you?" he asked. "She knows everyone," Lily said, "and everything, and when not to tell." She was halfway to the door when voices rose from below. Not the easy Gloucester talk of bait prices and engines. These voices had their vowels ironed and their patience bought. Lily froze, turned to Jonathan and lifted a finger to her lips. Boots thudded on the lobby floorboards. A laugh cut quick. Then another voice joined, slower, with the authority of a man used to stopping traffic just by being in the road. Sheriff Nolan Briggs. Lily's stomach fell like a trapdoor opening. Briggs had a way of patting a child on the head while counting his change with the other hand. He'd once told Lily to move it along with a smile that had no warmth in it at all. "Check the rooms," Briggs said, his words carrying up the stairwell like a tide. "Gentlemen, the benefactor is generous when he's satisfied. You know what you're looking for." "What about warrants?" said someone, sounding like he knew the script but not the part. "Don't you worry about paper," Briggs replied. "You worry about results." Jonathan's eyes found Lily's. They didn't widen. They didn't flinch. They simply asked the question she had already answered. The closet. Lily opened it and slid the panel at the back, revealing a square mouth dark as a well. "Laundry chute," she whispered. "It doesn't go all the way down. There's a shelf where the duct splits, small enough for me, big enough for Henry." Jonathan shook his head. "You won't fit with him, and I won't let you go alone." "I'm not going alone," she said, though she didn't know what she meant until her hand found it. The old linen cart with its canvas sling. She rolled it to the chute, tore the seam with a quick wrench, and fashioned a hammock inside the closet's throat. Henry fussed, nose wrinkling. Jonathan kissed his forehead, and the baby softened, as if recognizing the taste of safety. Lily settled him into the canvas cradle, tucking her cardigan around him. Jonathan reached his hand in and kept his palm on Henry's chest through the fabric. "Breathe," Jonathan whispered, not sure whether he meant the baby or himself. Boots on the first staircase, doors opening, a bang, a curse. On the second staircase now, closer. Lily darted to the bed frame, yanked at a screw with her fingers, then with her teeth when her nails bent, freed it and tucked it between her palms. She knelt and dragged the dust under the bed into a smooth wake, erasing their footprints as best she could. The window latch squealed, a tiny metal scream. She winced and stopped. No time for the window, only the door. She gathered a pinch of dust and rubbed it into the knob to dull the shine, then looped a silky thread from the ruined curtain around the latch and tied it to a nail just inside the door jamb. A second loop fixed the inner knob to a chair back, barely visible in the room's dim light. "For what?" Jonathan whispered. "For a second," she said, and met his eyes. "Sometimes a second is all you get." The hallway went quiet in that way that means it's about to get loud. The handle turned. The thread went taut, holding the latch for a heartbeat. 1, 2, then snapped. The door opened 3 inches, bumped the chair, and stuck, as if the room itself were reluctant to be entered. That half-breath of hesitation was enough for Lily to slide herself into the closet and pull it shut, leaving a sliver, a cat's eye of dark through which she could see. "Clear this floor," a man muttered. Heavy shoes stepped into the room. The chair scraped. The door opened. From her slit of sight, Lily saw 2 men in dark work coats and the sheriff behind them, hands on his belt, face composed as a sermon. The first man swung a flashlight beam that cut the dust into floating galaxies. It swept the bed, the floorboards, the window, the closet door where Lily held her breath until dizziness blued the edges of her vision. "Nothing to see," the room said, and tried to mean it. The second man stepped closer to the closet, the light shining along the seam. He paused. Lily counted to 3 and found nothing after 3 that she could count. The beam lifted. "Empty," the man said. "Old places hide old stories, not new men," Briggs answered, turning away. "Room 12, then the attic." They left. The door clicked. Silence returned with the relief of air after deep water. Lily uncurled from the closet, every joint discovering it had been a fist. Jonathan moved his hand from the canvas cradle to her shoulder. "Clever," he whispered. "Lucky," she said, and then shook her head. "No, we need more than luck." Henry mewed. Lily lifted him, breathing him in as if he carried a better kind of air. She reknotted the sling and slid him against her. Jonathan stood, slowly, steadied by the bed frame. "We can't wait for night," he said. They'll leave eyes on the pier." "I wasn't waiting," Lily replied, a spark in her voice. "We're not rats to be smoked out." She crossed to the window and peered down. Along Harbor Loop, a black SUV idled like a thought you couldn't stop thinking. A man leaned against it, his coat too clean for this town. Across the street, a woman in a city trench held a coffee she didn't drink and watched the doorways as if they might confess. And at the corner, Sheriff Briggs spoke into his radio and smiled a smile Lily felt in her bones. "We need an exit they don't know," Jonathan said. "A way that doesn't look like a way." Lily's eyes tracked the roof lines, the tangle of back alleys, the narrow scissor of space between Green's and the bait warehouse. She pictured how the buildings fit together like puzzle pieces laid by a drunk god. Then she remembered. The seam between the inn's kitchen and the old ice house, filled decades ago but never fully. A crawl space, then a hatch into the fish room below, a hatch so mean and low, even children preferred to use the door. "Follow me," Lily said, "and step where I step." They slipped into the hallway, quiet as apology. At the stairs, Lily paused, listening, not for footsteps, but for the lack of them. A humming silence, electrical, expectant, told her she had the moment. She took it. Down one flight, then through a service corridor lined with idle refrigerators. At the far end, she pried up a mildewed rug, then a square of wood her small hands knew. The smell rose first, cold, metallic, with the iron tang of fish from a season that had forgotten it was over. Lily slid down feet first, dropped into the space with a soft grunt, and reached up for Henry. Jonathan lowered the baby, then himself, nearly blacking out when his ribs grazed the hatch frame. He caught the floor with one hand, hissed, and stayed upright because Henry was in the crook of his other arm, and that was enough. They crouched in a low corridor that forced shoulders into humility. Lily guided them by touch more than sight, hands ghosting the wall for old nails and fresher splinters. 2 turns, a crawl beneath a beam, and then the narrow rectangle of a door without a door, the back of the old ice house. She pushed, and cold air kissed their faces. They stepped into a forest of hanging nets. Through the tangle, Lily saw daylight cut into water, thin and bright, the glint of a tide behind the buildings. If they could thread the nets, they could reach the back gangway that emptied onto a dock few used since the big boats moved down the shore. "Go," she breathed, and then froze. A shape at the far end of the net forest. A man with a phone to his ear, turning toward them, eyes narrowing. He was wrong for this place. Shoes that hated fish, a posture that didn't know wind. The phone lifted from his ear as he stepped closer, mouth opening on Lily's name, though he had never learned it. She moved faster than the fear. Her hand found a cleat knife on a wall hook, not to use, but to cut a rope above them. Netting spilled like a wave, a cascade of coarse mesh and floats. It fell the way snow falls from a shallow roof, sudden, total. The man cursed as the net collapsed over him, his phone clattering, his shoes wrestling with the sea he had mocked. "Run," Lily said, and they did. Down the gangway, over boards slick with old salt, out into the light that felt like freedom even if it wasn't. Behind them, a shout. Ahead, a boat keying its engine into life. Lily saw the name painted in chipped letters, Maggie G. She knew that boat. Knew the man who ran her, too. Evan Green, Mrs. Green's son, whose debts to the town were measured in favors rather than dollars. He saw them and frowned, confusion overcoming caution for a single holy second. "Please," Lily called, voice cracking. "For your mother." That was the right password. Evan's eyes sharpened, then softened. He threw a line, hauled them in like a last-minute catch, and shoved the throttle so the boat's stern bit water. The Maggie G swung, her nose finding the break between pilings, and leapt forward as if eager for a job that wasn't hauling fish. On the pier, Sheriff Briggs emerged, radio in hand, smile gone. He raised the device, spoke, listened, and then looked out at the Maggie G, with a gaze that promised this conversation wasn't over. Next to him, the man who had worn the net like a borrowed punishment tore himself free and pointed. Lily pressed her cheek to Henry's head and felt him breathe. Jonathan stood braced against the gunwale, one arm around his son, the other around the certainty that this moment would cost them later. He looked down at Lily. "You saved us," he said, for the second time in 2 days. Lily shook her head and tightened her grip. "We saved each other," she said. "Now we make it count." The harbor opened. The Maggie G ran for the mouth like a fish that had remembered it belonged to the sea. Behind them, Gloucester shrank to a scatter of roofs and a spire holding up the sky. Ahead, somewhere beyond the horizon and the winter glare, Boston waited with its ink and its laws and its fragile, stubborn faith in proof. Between all of that and the people who didn't want it to happen, there was a 7-year-old girl, a wounded father, a sleeping child, and a watch whose fractured face still kept perfect time. They held on. The Maggie G churned through the chop, her diesel heart thudding like a drum in Lily's chest. Salt spray peppered her cheeks as she crouched near the gunwale. Henry pressed to her ribs. Jonathan sat opposite, pale, his shirt clinging damp, one hand clenched around the bench as if the sea meant to take him again. Gloucester shrank behind them, the roofs dissolving into mist. But the danger did not dissolve. It lingered on the deck, in the engine's growl, in the lines of worry across Jonathan's face. "Where can we go?" Lily asked over the wind. Jonathan's eyes narrowed against the spray. "Somewhere they can't walk in with a badge and a smile. Somewhere that sees more sky than paper." Lily looked east, where the morning light fractured through cloud. Then her gaze caught something else. A white tower etched against the horizon, proud and solitary. Gloucester Lighthouse, its beam still fading after a long night of keeping ships honest. "The lighthouse," Lily said. "Captain Harris lives there." Jonathan frowned. "Harris? He's old, grumpy sometimes, but he's fair. People say he sees storms before the clouds even gather." Jonathan followed her gaze, then nodded. "If he's half that, we may last the night." Evan Green cut the throttle near the rocky spit that jutted like a tooth from the sea. "That's as close as I go," he muttered, jaw tight. "Sheriff Briggs has eyes on me already. If they know I helped you—" Jonathan pressed his shoulder. "You've done more than enough. Thank you." Evan gave Lily a quick look. "You trust Harris, kid?" "With my skin," Lily answered simply. That was enough. Evan tossed a line, steadied the boat against the rocks. Lily jumped first, clutching Henry. Jonathan followed, nearly collapsing on the landing but catching himself against the rail. The lighthouse loomed above, stone stacked against the sky, its windows like unblinking eyes. They climbed the narrow path, boots crunching frost. At the heavy oak door, Lily banged the knocker 3 times. Silence. Then the scrape of bolts. The door cracked. A face appeared, lined like driftwood, eyes blue and hard as winter sea. "Parker," Captain Harris said, voice rough as rope. "What in God's tide are you dragging here?" "A man and his baby," Lily said, "and trouble behind them." Harris's gaze shifted to Jonathan, who leaned against the stone, swaying, then to the bundle in Lily's arms. The old man's jaw worked, chewing on silence. Finally, he opened the door wide. "Inside," he said. The lighthouse smelled of oil and salt bread. Charts littered the table, lines of ink tracing shoals like scars. Harris shut the bolts and poured brandy into a chipped glass, thrusting it at Jonathan. "Drink before your blood freezes." Jonathan obeyed, coughing as the liquor burned through him. He set Henry carefully in a cradle Harris dragged from a corner. a relic from years when the lighthouse had been a family's post, not a bachelor's fortress. "Now," Harris said, lowering himself onto a stool, "tell me why Briggs's boys are prowling the harbor like gulls on a gut pile." Jonathan's voice carried the weight of boardrooms and secrets. He spoke of the explosion, of Richard Cole's ambition, of the evidence locked within the cracked Swiss watch. He spoke of Julia Monroe and the Boston Globe, of the danger that shadowed them even across water. Harris listened, his expression carved from granite. When Jonathan finished, the captain spat into the fire. "Cole," Harris muttered. "I knew his father. Mean as a hook, that one. Apples don't fall far." He turned to Lily. "And you, girl? You saved them?" She lifted her chin. "The tide was coming in. Someone had to." Harris studied her, then nodded once. "You've got more salt than half the men in this town." The compliment warmed her like soup. Night pressed quickly, thick fog curling around the windows. Harris lit the lamp, its great lens turning with a patient groan, throwing a beam that lanced through the dark. The sea answered with silver shimmer. Jonathan stood at the window, Henry asleep against his shoulder. The light swept across his face, showing exhaustion, yes, but also resolve rekindled. "Cole won't stop," he said. "He'll send hunters, not deputies next time." "And you?" Harris asked. "I'll get to Boston," Jonathan said, "but not tonight. Tonight I stand because she," he looked at Lily, "gave me her strength." Lily flushed, staring into the fire. "You'll need more than strength," Harris said. He leaned close, voice dropping. "Word came down this morning. There's a price on you, Hale. Not a bounty in ink. One whispered in bars, in dockyards. They want proof you're gone." Jonathan stiffened. "Already?" Harris nodded. "Briggs sold your shadow cheap. A pair of outsiders docked at £10. Faces like they've never gutted a fish. They'll come sniffing." Lily's stomach nodded. "Then we can't stay." "Not long," Harris agreed. "But the night's yours. I'll keep the lamp burning. They won't approach while she's awake." He tapped the great lens with a fondness that sounded like faith. Jonathan eased into a chair. Henry cradled close. "Captain, if anything happens—" "Nothing happens unless you let it," Harris interrupted. "And you won't, because you've got something more dangerous than men with guns." Jonathan raised a brow. "And that is?" Harris pointed at Lily, who blinked. "Hope with legs," he said. Later, when the lighthouse had settled into creaks and sighs, Lily sat by the cradle, listening to Henry's steady breaths. Jonathan slept nearby, pale but alive. Harris kept watch in the tower above, the great lamp sweeping its endless circle. But Lily could not sleep. She crept to the window, staring out at the black sea. Somewhere beyond that dark, men searched for them. Somewhere in Boston, truth waited to be spoken. She pressed her hand to the glass, whispering to the beam as it swept, "Keep us safe. Just one more night." And though the sea gave no answer, the light bent across the fog like a promise. The morning broke with a fog so thick it seemed the ocean had crept ashore and claimed the lighthouse for its own. The great lamp still turned above them, cutting the mist in wide arcs, but its reach was swallowed quickly, as if the day itself wanted secrecy. Lily woke first, her body trained by nights on the street. She checked Henry, his breath warm against her neck, then glanced at Jonathan. He lay stiff on the cot, one arm across his ribs, the Swiss watch still strapped, cracked face glinting faintly in the dim light. His chest rose and fell with shallow effort, but his eyes opened when he felt her gaze. "We can't stay," he said simply. Captain Harris descended the stairwell, his boots striking each step like a verdict. "You'll get no argument from me," he said. "Two strangers asked after you in town." Briggs pointed them toward the pier. "They'll work their way here by evening." Jonathan sat up, wincing. "Then we leave now, but not just to run. We need to strike back, make the truth louder than Cole's lies." Harris folded his arms. "And how do you plan to do that? Half dead and hunted?" Jonathan tapped the watch. "This holds the keys. Julia Monroe at the Boston Globe can publish it, but even print takes time. Cole owns television airtime, online feeds, 1,000 outlets ready to smear us before ink is dry. We need a faster way. A broadcast, live, unfiltered." Lily leaned forward. "Like the big antennas? The ones on the Boston towers?" Jonathan nodded. "The WGBH relay station on Cedar Street. It's linked into the public emergency alert system. With the right credentials, you can push data straight into newsrooms before anyone can spin it." Harris's brows climbed. "And you have those credentials?" Jonathan gave a weary smile. "Hale Biotech funds half their public health programs. They owe me clearance codes. If I can reach the terminal, the watch decrypts and uploads everything. Audio, contracts, wire trails. Cole won't just lose the company. He'll face indictments." Lily absorbed every word, her small hands curling around the blanket at Henry's side. "Then I'll go," she said. Both men turned to her. "You?" Jonathan said. "You can't run," she said firmly. "And they'll look for you, not me. I'm small. I can slip through." "No," Jonathan snapped. Then softer, pained. "You're 7 years old." Lily lifted her chin. 7 doesn't mean useless. I got you out of the inn. I kept Henry breathing. And I can carry a watch." Harris gave a dry chuckle. "She's got more salt than sense, but she's right. The town won't see a child as threat. And if you go together, you'll drag notice. Sometimes the smallest boat crosses the storm." Jonathan rubbed his temples. The father in him warred with the man who knew strategy. At last, he looked at Lily, truly looked, and saw not just a child, but the resolve that had pulled him from death. "If you go," he said slowly, "you won't be alone. I'll come as far as I can. Harris can guide us to a fisherman headed for Boston. But the last steps, Lily, they'll be yours." She nodded once, fierce and certain. By noon, Harris had rowed them to a hidden cove where lobster traps rusted in heaps. There, a weathered trawler waited, its captain a gaunt man with oil-stained hands who owed Harris more than coin. "No names," Harris told him. "Just get them to East Boston, under the bridge." The man grunted assent, eyes flicking over Lily and Henry with something like pity. The voyage was rough. Jonathan held Henry close, his body swaying with the boat's rhythm, pain etched deep but unspoken. Lily sat opposite, the watch hidden under her dress, memorizing the pattern Jonathan had taught her again and again. Forward, back, back, forward, press. Time itself waiting for her touch. As the skyline of Boston rose through the fog, Lily felt her chest tighten. The city looked like another world, towers of glass, highways that roared like rivers, bridges that stitched the horizon together. For a girl who had slept under Gloucester's piers, it was too big, too fast, too sharp. But she thought of Henry, of Jonathan's eyes when he whispered, "Please don't let them find us," and the fear settled into resolve. They docked in the shadows of an old wharf. Harris clasped Jonathan's shoulder. "You'll be safe enough here until night. I'll draw eyes back north. But girl," he fixed Lily with a gaze that could still a tide. You carry more than a watch. You carry proof that men like Cole don't own everything, don't stumble. I won't, Lily said, though her stomach quivered. Jonathan crouched before her, his gray eyes soft despite exhaustion. He placed Henry briefly in her arms. This is why, he said. Every risk, every mile, it's for him. Remember that when the streets feel too wide. She kissed Henry's forehead, handed him back, and felt the ache of parting heavier than hunger ever was. Jonathan slid the watch into her palm, closing her small fingers over it. Find Julia Monroe at the Globe. If you can't, reach the WGBH tower. Don't trust anyone with a badge unless Julia's standing beside them. And Lily, come back. His voice cracked on the last words. I will, she whispered. The city swallowed her quickly. Lily threaded through crowds on Cambridge Street, head down, watching reflections in windows the way she once watched for gulls near food stalls. Twice she saw men who walked too clean, scanning faces with interest that wasn't shopping or working. She ducked into alleys, through markets, her size her shield. Near the bus depot, danger tightened. Two men loitered by the benches, photos in their hands. One bent toward the other, showing a picture. Lily caught a glimpse. Jonathan's face, grainy but clear. She froze. Then Henry's absence hit her like a fist. No crying to distract them this time. One man turned. His gaze swept the crowd. For a breath it skimmed over her, then paused. Too long. Lily's pulse thundered. She slipped behind a woman with grocery bags, used her skirt as cover, and darted toward the stairwell leading to the subway. Boot steps followed. She ran. Down the stairs, through the echoing tunnel of Harvard Square Station. The crowd pressed tight, the smell of iron and damp concrete choking her. Behind, the men shouted. She weaved through commuters, ducked under a turnstile, heart battering her ribs. A train screamed into the platform, doors yawning open. Lily hurled herself inside just as the men reached the glass. Their palms slammed against it. She stumbled into a seat, clutching the watch so hard its cracked face bit into her palm. The train lurched forward, carrying her away, carrying the proof that might yet save them. The subway roared like a beast through the tunnels, its steel heart hammering against Lily's ears. She sat wedged between strangers, her small hands locked around the cracked Swiss watch hidden beneath her dress. Every jolt of the train made her imagine the men above, plotting, waiting for the doors to open. When the train screeched into Harvard Square, the crowd shifted. Students with backpacks surged toward the exit, their chatter bright and careless. Lily rose with them, head low, her braid brushing against a professor's coat. She slipped out, her shoes clapping the concrete steps, lungs already preparing for a sprint. But when she reached the plaza above, she froze. The men were there. They leaned against the red brick walls near the newsstand, scanning faces with cold intent. One of them turned, and his eyes found hers. Lily ran. The square erupted with noise. Street musicians drumming, vendors shouting about pretzels, buses exhaling clouds of steam. Lily darted between legs and bicycles, her small frame a dart in a crowded maze. Behind her, boots thundered. "Stop that, girl!" a man barked. No one listened. In Harvard Square, children ran all the time, but Lily's chest burned with the knowledge that this was no game. She cut through the courtyard of Harvard Yard, past the iron gates, the statue of John Harvard gleaming dull in the gray light. Students turned, startled, as she bolted across the grass. The watch thumped against her ribs. A hand grabbed for her sleeve. She twisted, teeth bared, and the man stumbled as she ducked under his arm. She had learned long ago that being small meant you could vanish if you moved faster than thought. But this time, they weren't giving up. Jonathan Hale staggered into the square just as Lily careened past the bookstore. He had followed the trail with pain gnawing his ribs, refusing to let her face danger alone. Henry was safe, left in Harris's trusted arms. Now Jonathan's eyes locked on the men chasing Lily, and something primal tore through him. "Lily!" he shouted. She turned, eyes wide with both fear and relief. "They're here!" Jonathan's body screamed against every step, but his mind silenced it. He pushed forward, weaving through the crowd. The men cursed as he appeared, their plans suddenly complicated. One lunged for Lily again. Jonathan intercepted, slamming his shoulder into the man's chest. Pain exploded in his ribs, but the man went down hard, sprawling across the cobblestones. The other pulled something from his coat, too long, too black. Jonathan grabbed Lily, yanked her behind a row of bikes, and the crowd shrieked as the object flashed. It wasn't a gun. Not yet. A stun baton, crackling with blue arcs. Still deadly. "Run!" "Lily!" Jonathan barked. "Find Julia Monroe!" But Lily shook her head, defiance blazing. "Not without you!" the man charged. Jonathan shoved Lily aside and braced, knowing his body would have to be the shield. The baton struck his arm, lightning tearing through muscle. He collapsed to one knee, teeth clenched, refusing to fall completely. Lily screamed. Her eyes darted to the ground, to the watch glinting where Jonathan had dropped it. She seized it, clutching it to her chest. The man reached for her, but the sound of a voice cut through the chaos. "Boston Globe! Let her go!" It was Julia Monroe. She stood at the edge of the square, camera crew behind her, microphone in hand. Her reputation was ink and steel, and even hired thugs hesitated under the eye of a rolling lens. The man cursed, retreating into the crowd. His partner, bruised from Jonathan's hit, scrambled up and followed. Within seconds, they were gone, swallowed by the square's confusion. Lily dropped to her knees beside Jonathan. "You're hurt!" He forced a grim smile. "Not dead. That's progress." Julia rushed over, kneeling, her sharp eyes already on the watch in Lily's trembling hands. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked. Jonathan nodded, his voice hoarse. "It's the key. Evidence. Everything on Cole. Get it out before he—" His words broke in a cough. Julia looked at Lily. "Can you trust me?" Lily studied her face, the lines of fatigue, the fire of belief. Then she nodded. "He said your name. He said you'd know what to do." Julia's hand hovered over the watch, then pulled back, respect in the gesture. "Then let's do it together." The sirens came too late, as they always did. Police swarmed, questioning, dispersing the crowd. But the truth was already moving, tucked under Julia's arm and Lily's fierce grip. Jonathan leaned back against the bookstore wall, pain etched deep, but hope lighting his eyes. For the first time since the explosion, the burden was not his alone. The city might still be hunting them. Richard Cole's shadow still stretched across every street. But tonight, in the heart of Harvard Square, a child had outrun fear, a father had shielded with his own body, and a journalist had stepped into the storm. And together, they had bought a few precious hours of truth. The newsroom of the Boston Globe thrummed with nervous energy, like a ship's deck before a storm. Phones rang, printers spat, and keyboards rattled under the weight of words too urgent to wait. Julia Monroe led the way through the clamor, her camera crew peeling off while she shepherded Jonathan and Lily into her office. Jonathan's limp was more pronounced now. The blow from the stun baton had left his arm rigid and his ribs aflame, but his eyes burned with purpose. Lily walked beside him, small and fierce, clutching the watch as if it were both weapon and compass. Julia closed the blinds. "We don't have long. Cole's people will already be spreading their version of the story." "What version?" Jonathan rasped. Julia's lips tightened. She turned her monitor so they could see. A breaking news banner ran across the screen. Boston CEO missing after luxury yacht disaster. Sources allege fraud, neglect. Beneath it, a polished commentator spoke into the camera. Evidence suggests Jonathan Hale may have embezzled millions from Hale Biotech's pediatric research fund. There are even claims he abandoned his infant son on board in a desperate attempt to flee. Lily gasped, fury flushing her cheeks. That's a lie. I was there. He held Henry the whole time. Jonathan pressed his hand to the desk, jaw locked. Cole's campaign. He moves faster than truth. Julia touched the watch in Lily's hand. Then let's make the truth louder. A technician arrived, summoned by Julia's call. They unscrewed the case back of the watch, revealing the tiny module glimmering like a secret heartbeat. Jonathan's fingers trembled as he guided Lily through the sequence. Forward, back, forward, press. The screen blinked, then filled with folders, audio files, wire transfer records, meeting transcripts, a document titled Operation Scuttled Starboard. Julia's breath caught. She clicked one. Richard Cole's voice spilled into the room, smooth and venomous. Sink him quietly. Without Jonathan, the board caves. Without the board, the patents are ours. Every syllable was a nail in the coffin of Cole's empire. Julia looked at Jonathan. This is enough to bury him. No, Jonathan said, voice harsh. It's enough to show the world. But the law, FBI, SEC, they'll hesitate. Cole's money poisons everything it touches. We need to make this public now, before he drowns us in lawsuits. Julia nodded. We'll run it front page. Midnight edition. Digital release in 1 hour. The press room roared to life. Headlines were drafted, copy checked, lawyers called. Julia's team moved with precision honed by years of battles against the powerful. But the newsroom's excitement could not drown the storm already rising outside. By evening, television pundits attacked from every channel. They called Jonathan a coward, a criminal, a reckless father. Anonymous sources claimed to have seen him funnel money into offshore accounts. The narrative spread like oil on water. Jonathan sat in Julia's office, head in his hands. He's faster. He's louder. Lily climbed onto the chair beside him, tugged his sleeve. But we have the truth. And truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand. Her words cut through the noise like a clear bell. Jonathan raised his head, eyes meeting hers, and some of the weight eased. At 9 o'clock sharp, the Globe published. Hale Biotech sabotaged. CFO. Richard Cole implicated in fraud and attempted murder. The article exploded across the digital world, accompanied by audio files and scanned contracts. Cole's voice, cold and calculating, filled phones and laptops from Boston to Washington. The hashtag #ColeConspiracy trended within minutes. But even as the truth spread, Cole struck back. His attorneys flooded networks with injunctions. Troll farms smeared Jonathan as a grieving lunatic fabricating evidence. And behind the noise, the FBI remained silent, their hesitation louder than any denial. Jonathan stared at the headlines, fury tightening every muscle. They'll hang me between guilty and innocent until I break. Julia reached across the desk. Then don't break. We've started the fire. Now we keep feeding it. Outside the Globe, protesters gathered, some demanding Jonathan's arrest, others chanting his name as if he were already vindicated. Police cruisers idled at the curb. Helicopters chopped the night sky. Lily stood at the window, small face illuminated by neon. She saw signs that read Justice for Henry and others that read Save Hale Biotech. She whispered almost to herself, They don't know who to believe. Jonathan came to stand beside her, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. Then we show them who we are, not just words on paper, flesh, blood, witness. Lily turned to him. Me? His eyes softened. Yes, you. Julia filed the final copy. Tomorrow, she said, we call a press conference. Let them see the man Cole tried to erase, and let them hear from the girl who pulled him back. Lily swallowed hard, but she didn't look away. She thought of Henry's tiny breath against her skin, of the tide tugging at Jonathan's body, of Sheriff Briggs's smile. She thought of fear and how many times she had outrun it, and she nodded. The Globe's press conference had been announced, but the weight of doubt hung thick. Across Boston, televisions replayed Cole's narrative, Jonathan Hale as fraudster, as negligent father, as man too rich to be trusted. For every retweet of Julia Monroe's exposé, there were 3 accusing Jonathan of lies. By dawn, Jonathan knew the city wasn't enough. Boston's towers listened to Cole. But Gloucester, the harbor, the fishermen, the neighbors who smelled truth the way they smelled a storm, that was where the tide could turn. We go back, Jonathan said, voice hoarse but steady. Julia frowned. Back to Gloucester? Jonathan, Cole's men are crawling the harbor. Jonathan's eyes flicked to Lily. The city doubts, but the people who pulled me from the tide, who saw me broken and saw Lily stand, if they speak, if they stand with us, the world will listen. Lily nodded fiercely. They'll believe. They always know when someone's lying. The return journey was cloaked in nerves. Harris met them at a slip near East Boston, his weather-beaten face lighting briefly at the sight of Lily's safe. Henry, bundled tight, gurgled in his arms before Jonathan took him back, pressing the boy close with reverence. They're waiting for you, Harris said. Word's spread already. Some think you drowned, others think you ran. Best set it straight with your own mouth. The Maggie G carried them north once more, her diesel groan steady as a heartbeat. As they neared Gloucester, Lily saw the docks crowded. Fishermen, wives, children, longshoremen. Not curious, not idle, but gathered with the solemn expectancy of a town that knew storms came in more than weather. Jonathan's chest tightened. He had spoken before crowds of shareholders, senators, journalists. None had terrified him like this. Men with nets in their hands, women with salt still in their hair, eyes that cut through pretense like knives through canvas. They docked. Silence fell heavy. Jonathan stepped onto the pier, Henry in his arms, Lily beside him. The sheriff's cruiser idled near the edge, Briggs standing tall, flanked by 2 deputies. His smirk gleamed. Jonathan Hale, Briggs called, voice oily. You're under suspicion of fraud and endangerment. Hand the child over, and maybe we sort this neat. A murmur swept the crowd. Mothers pulled children closer. Men set their jaws. Jonathan drew a breath. Neighbors. Friends. You know me. Maybe not my face, but my work. Hale Biotech has funded your clinics, your schools, your docks. Richard Cole wants to steal that, to choke it for profit. He tried to drown me. He tried to drown my son, and he will drown every one of you if we let him. Briggs barked a laugh. Fine speech, but words don't weigh against law. Then Lily stepped forward. She looked impossibly small against the cruiser lights, her gray dress tugged by the wind. But her voice, when it rang out, carried farther than Jonathan's. I was there. The crowd hushed. I saw the boat explode. I pulled Mr. Hale from the tide. I kept Henry alive. He never left his baby. He never ran. He fought to breathe because he knew Henry needed him, and because he knew Cole was wrong. Her words cracked, but she didn't falter. You all know me. I've begged bread from your tables. I've slept in your sheds. I've watched who tells truth and who sells it. And I tell you now, Richard Cole is lying. Sheriff Briggs is helping him lie. And if you let them take Jonathan, you let them take every honest thing left. The pier trembled under the roar that followed. Fishermen slammed fists against pilings. Mothers shouted Lily's name. Children chanted back her words. Briggs lifted his hand, but no deputy moved. The crowd surged forward, bodies forming a wall between Jonathan and the lawman. You won't touch him, Martha Green declared, her frail frame unshaken. Not while Gloucester breathes. Briggs's smirk collapsed. His radio hissed useless. He stepped back, swallowed by the fury of neighbors who had chosen truth over fear. Jonathan felt tears sting his eyes. He turned to Lily, voice thick. You did this. Lily shook her head. We did it. Henry did it. Even the sea did it. It gave you back. Above them, the lighthouse beams swept across the harbor, steady and unblinking. For the first time, Jonathan believed the tide had shifted. The summons arrived faster than Jonathan expected. The federal courthouse in Manhattan scheduled a hearing within 48 hours, calling it an emergency session to determine his credibility and potential charges. It wasn't justice. It was theater staged by Richard Cole. Gloucester had shielded him, but New York was Cole's arena. Marble halls, sharp suits, whispers traded like currency. Yet Jonathan knew he couldn't refuse. To hide would confirm Cole's lies. I'll go, he told Harris, Martha, and Julia as they gathered in the lighthouse kitchen. His arm still ached from the baton strike, his ribs bruised, but his voice was steady. I'll stand in the open, for Henry, for Lily, for the truth. Lily set her jaw. Then I'm going too. Jonathan shook his head. No, Lily. But Julia interrupted. She has to. Cole's lawyers will twist every fact, but they can't twist the voice of a child who was there. The room fell silent. Jonathan looked at Lily, at the fierce fire in her eyes, and he knew there would be no convincing her otherwise. The courthouse steps on Foley Square were a battlefield. Reporters jostled, cameras flashed, protesters shouted across barricades. One banner read, Justice for Henry, another screamed, Jail the fraud. Jonathan held Henry close, his small face hidden beneath a knit cap. Lily walked beside him, hand tight in his coat pocket, the Swiss watch secured against her chest. Julia flanked them, voice calm as she spoke to the press. Mr. Hale has come to clear his name. The evidence is real. The truth will be heard. Inside, the courtroom was a cathedral of wood and authority. Judge Marlowe presided from the bench, eyes sharp and tired. The gallery buzzed with reporters, Cole's legal team arrayed like polished knives. At the defense table sat Richard Cole himself, immaculate in a navy suit, a smile carved from stone. Jonathan felt Lily stiffen at the sight. He bent low. Don't be afraid. I'm not, she whispered. I'm angry. The proceedings began. Cole's attorneys pounced, their voices smooth as oil. Jonathan had mismanaged funds. He had staged his disappearance. He endangered his own son. They painted him as a man unfit for boardroom or fatherhood. Then Julia rose, presenting the decrypted files. The courtroom listened to Cole's recorded voice. Sink him quietly. Without Jonathan, the board caves. Murmurs rippled, reporters scribbled furiously. Cole's attorney objected. Fabricated, stolen property, inadmissible. Judge Marlowe frowned. Objection noted. Continue. But Cole leaned back, unshaken. He knew how to blur lines, how to turn truth into smoke. That was when Lily stood. Her small frame looked fragile in the vast courtroom, but her voice was clear. "I was there," she said. "I saw the boat explode. I pulled Mr. Hale out of the water. I held Henry so he wouldn't freeze. And I heard Mr. Hale say, 'Richard Cole wanted him gone.'" The courtroom fell silent. Cole's attorney tried to sneer. "Your Honor, this is a child. She can't testify to matters of corporate law." Judge Marlowe leaned forward. "She can testify to what she saw, and I want to hear it." So Lily told them. She described the tide pulling Jonathan under, the cracked watch clutched in his hand, the men who searched the pier, the sheriff who smiled too wide. She spoke of truth the way children do, without embellishment, without agenda, with the raw clarity that strips power bare. By the time she finished, there were tears in more than one juror's eyes. Jonathan reached for her hand, pride surging through the pain. Cole rose, fury trembling beneath his polished mask. "This is absurd. We cannot allow a corporation's fate to rest on the words of a vagrant child." But before he could finish, Julia held up a final document. Bank records signed in his own hand, matched against offshore accounts. The watch had unlocked everything. Gasps filled the chamber. The judge's gavel struck. "Enough! The evidence is overwhelming. This court recommends immediate federal indictment against Richard Cole." Cole's face drained of color. Deputies closed in. Outside, the courthouse erupted. Reporters shouted questions, cameras blinded. Jonathan stepped forward, Henry in his arms, Lily by his side. "I was accused of abandoning my son," he told the crowd. "But the truth is, I was saved by someone else's daughter. Lily Parker reminded me that no wealth is greater than the courage to tell the truth. She saved my life, and tonight, she saved this company." The cheers drowned out the jeers. For the first time since the explosion, Jonathan felt the tide shift not just in Gloucester, but in the heart of the nation. And when he looked down, Lily's hand was still clasped in his, steady as a lighthouse beam. The storm had broken. Richard Cole sat in federal custody, his empire crumbling under the weight of evidence. Headlines across the country spoke not of Jonathan's downfall, but of his survival, and of the 7-year-old girl who had saved him. But Jonathan didn't linger in New York. Courtrooms and boardrooms had taken enough. His heart longed for the salt wind of Gloucester, for the place where this second life had begun. So on a late autumn afternoon, he returned. The harbor smelled of diesel and brine, nets drying on the pier. Fishermen raised their hands in greeting. Some clapped him on the shoulder. Others pressed gifts of bread or blankets into Lily's arms. She accepted shyly, though her eyes shone with the knowledge that she belonged here now. At the end of the pier, the lighthouse waited. Its stone walls glowed amber in the lowering sun, the lamp above turning slow and patient. Captain Harris stood outside, leaning on his cane, Martha Green beside him. "You made it back," Harris said, his gravelly voice softening. "Because you held the light," Jonathan replied. Inside the lighthouse, Henry gurgled in Martha's arms while Lily hovered protectively, her small fingers brushing his hair. Jonathan watched them, something swelling in his chest that no title or fortune had ever given him. He cleared his throat. "There's something I need to say." The room quieted. "I once thought legacy was profit margins, patents, towers with my name on them. But legacy is this." He looked at Henry, then at Lily. "It's a child's courage. It's a community that stood between me and corruption. It's knowing that no matter how far the tide pulls, there will be hands to bring you back." He turned to Lily. "And it's family, whether by blood or by choice. Lily Parker, if you'll have me, I would be honored to make you my daughter." For a moment she didn't breathe. Then her face broke open with a smile brighter than the lighthouse beam. "I already was," she whispered, "from the moment I pulled you out of the water." Jonathan knelt, pulling her into his arms, Henry cradled between them. Harris's eyes glistened. Martha dabbed her cheeks with her apron. The lighthouse hummed, its lamp sweeping the sea like a blessing. In the months that followed, Hale Biotech steadied under new leadership, guided by reforms Jonathan set in place before stepping back. He no longer craved the front page. He preferred the quiet rhythm of Gloucester, Henry's laughter echoing against the rocks, Lily's footsteps racing down the pier, Harris barking orders she only half obeyed. One winter evening, Julia Monroe visited, notebook tucked under her arm. She found Jonathan on the lighthouse balcony, Lily beside him. "The world wants another interview," Julia teased. Jonathan shook his head. "Tell them the truth doesn't live in towers anymore." "It lives here," he nodded toward Lily and Henry, "and in any heart willing to carry it." Julia smiled, closing her notebook. "That's the story I'll write." As the sun sank, the family climbed to the top of the lighthouse. The great lamp turned, spilling light across the harbor. Jonathan lifted Henry onto his shoulder, Lily at his side. The three of them stood silhouetted against the golden sky, three survivors bound not by accident, but by choice. Lily whispered, "The sea tried to take you." "And you gave me back," Jonathan said. Together they watched the horizon, the lamp sweeping steady as breath. In its glow, the world felt possible again, safe, true, whole. Because sometimes the brightest lighthouse isn't built of stone. It beats quietly in the human heart, guiding the lost home. Thank you, dear friends, for staying with Jonathan, Lily, and Henry until the very last page of this journey. Their story reminds us that even in the darkest storms, truth and love can shine like a lighthouse, guiding us safely home. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to join us for more healing stories of courage, hope, and second chances. Together, let's keep the light burning.